Awesome. Let's get started. I
Let's
think
do this.
it's been a few years actually since we had you on. I want to say like we first had you on when we just came out of stealth. So I'm
Yeah,
really
that's
excited.
right.
I'm really excited to have you
Thank
back,
you.
man. Thanks for coming.
See, reunion
Um,
tour.
that's right. That's right. For anybody that's tuning in, feel free to let us know where you're listening in from. It's always nice to see the international crowd, but a man that needs no introduction, Joe Reis.
How you doing?
Welcome. Couldn't be happier to have you here.
Likewise, good to see you, man. So it's like it's been a while. Miss you. Let's
Yeah,
uh let's chat about
let's
whatever.
chat.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this can go in many different directions. People may not even know what they signed up for. So it could go data, it could go MMA, it could go DJing, but maybe we should start with data
Yeah.
and start with your life as well, because I feel like you have been quite the globetrotter over the past couple years since we
hmm
last had you on.
Yeah.
What have you been up to lately? Like, where has Joe Reese been?
Well, I'm currently in Salt Lake City, where I live. But where was I? I've was most recently over in Europe, which is where I go a lot actually.
Yep,
This time around, Germany and Austria. So I was there for a winter data conference with our mutual
yep,
friend Chris Tab and Lead Data. We were uh, actually some friends of from Coalesce as well there. Had
that's
a nice
right.
one for dinner, so it was great.
I
Great
may have got
time.
some drunk photos that night while you were out there.
Might have happened. You can blackmail me later. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. But I think a lot of trips like that, right? So just a lot of traveling here and there. The last few years have been nuts. I think
Yeah.
you've taken off with Coalesce. I took off for other reasons, and
Yeah.
I almost spend more time overseas than actually in the States. But I think
What's
yeah.
What's that been like? So I know the Winter Data Conference, really great community building event. Like you have had your book published now for maybe a couple years at this point.
About two and
And
a
so
half
is it
years. Yeah.
2.5 years? Congrats on
Yeah.
that. Still such a popular book. I
hmm
think it's probably the most comprehensive data engineering book, period.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
You're welcome. You're very welcome. I mean that. I don't think there's much other content that's as on point. And so when you're out on the road, is it mostly in regards to evangelizing the book? Is it, are you just like talking about new data trends? Is it what's it like?
I
Day
think
in the
more of
life.
the latter, really. It's kind of like these days. I mean, I think I'm the kind of guy where after something's been done and published, I kind of move on mentally from it.
Yeah.
Like I think I spent maybe only 6 months, I think, talking specifically about the fundamentals of data engineering book. And then,
Yeah.
I've been talking about other topics. I think the one I've been talking about the most has been data modeling, actually,
Yeah.
which, we can talk more about. But I think
That's how we
after,
met.
it
That
was
was
how we
like
met. Yeah,
that was our hot topic when we
it
first
was.
met. Prior
It
to
was.
having you on, we were like, "Oh, you actually care about this stuff."
Yeah,
It
which is kind
wasn't
of
it
weird
wasn't
back
being
then
talked
because
about at all back
no,
then.
you guys were, obviously have a tool that works in this
Yeah.
area. And then, but right after fundamentals came out, I started toying with the idea of writing a book on data modeling. And so that's pretty much what I've been working on since that, plus just
Yeah.
traveling and giving talks and, uh, made a course with deep learning AI and Andering, and it's on Coursera. So that was a lot of fun, but that was
Nice.
on data engineering, I guess. And then, yeah, just been traveling the world talking about data modeling for the most part. And that's been interesting to see the evolution of that conversation, where I think when we first started talking about it, people were definitely scratching their heads, like, why of any topic would you pick this one to talk about? Um, it's definitely, definitely kind of as a old man screaming at the sky kind of topic. But
Yeah.
you fast forward to today, and it's become definitely like a few other things in our industry. What's old is new again. The pendulum has definitely swung back to
For
the
sure.
fundamentals, and data modeling being one of the fundamentals. And so the topic, I would say, is more relevant than ever. I can't take
Yeah.
full credit for pushing it. I think there's, people like yourself have been also doing, the
Yeah.
Lord's work in this area, and a few others. But it definitely was a cold start problem for a bit, where data modeling was
Yeah.
um, definitely not the topic that it is today. I still think there's a long ways to go, but it's
Definitely.
more prevalent than it was, which was basically
Is
dead,
that book
actually.
Is that book on the way out? Is it? It's
I'm
not
hoping to
published
get it
yet.
done this summer and published. Yeah, like so I'm
I can't
publishing
wait then.
early
Love it.
drafts over on Substack, and
Yeah.
so that's been good just to write a book in public and get feedback on that. But I think at the rate I'm going, it should be published this summer sometime. So that'll be nice. God, Lord knows I'm sure you're the same way. You got a lot of things you want to get done, but there's always like that one thing in front of you where
For sure.
you kind of got to get this thing out of the way.
That's
But
that one thing for you right now is the data modeling
The
book.
book, yeah, but I mean, it kind of, set the stage for a lot of other things I'm working on. But it's just that one thing where it's like the hardest thing you have to do, and it's just constantly, in
Yeah.
front. But yeah, like I said, everyone has this in their life, right?
Yes.
Everyone has their crucible, so to speak. So yeah,
Mhm.
but
Well, it's a very relevant one. It's interesting. When we first had you on, whatever it was, 2.5, 3 years ago, and we were talking about this topic. I think at that point, most people were feeling the pain of not having good data modeling best practices. And then now it's becoming more of a trend. Like I know you're starting to hear when we're in the field talking to companies, like they have this whole medallion architecture, for example. Like
mm,
that seems like not the be all end all, or probably not the right destination, but at least it's a step closer to having some type of data modeling best
oh yeah,
practices.
well,
What
that's
else are you
interesting, right?
seeing?
Yeah, because the medallion architecture, I don't think that's data modeling per se, but it certainly sets the guardrails in the workflow where
Exactly.
if you're thinking about medallion, then implicitly you're thinking about, okay, so how am I going to, take, basically raw data, so to speak, and convert that
Yep.
into something that's usable for analytics in a sequential fashion, right? And so
Yep.
I think that
Yeah.
it's yeah, seeing that more and more. I run a Discord group, and medallion keeps popping up as one of the topics people talk about. I see that on LinkedIn as well, and other social media platforms. Uh, it's funny because medallion's been around for a bit, right?
Yeah.
I mean, since late 2010s, early
Mhm.
2010s. But yeah, but like a lot of things, it takes a bit for I think it's just the crossing the chasm as it classically is, where early
Yeah.
adopters aren't the same thing as the late majority, and so it takes time. It takes time, but it
Yeah.
takes I think evangelism of practices, and eventually when enough people hear about it, especially from their friends and peers, and suddenly what's was unknown becomes known and important, and so
Yeah.
that's cool. What
Yeah.
are you seeing though in terms of conversations around data modeling? I mean, you're out there in the field a lot. I actually met you when you were before you were at Coalesce. You were
Yeah.
selling another product, and
That's right.
yeah, and we're talking about, and I think data modeling was one of the emphasis of that thing. But what so fast, so you've been talking about this for a while, I suppose, is what I'm trying to set you up for with clients and stuff. But what are you seeing
Definitely.
these days?
So when we met, I remember you clearly mentioning that there hadn't really been much innovation on data modeling. Like 2.5, 3 years ago, you're like there was Ralph Kimball, Inman, Star
Data
Schema, Third
Vault,
Level Form. Data Vault 2.0 was the most recent innovation, let's call it.
yeah.
And there wasn't really anything since then. I would say the concept of a data mesh, I don't know if you would consider that data modeling, but like that became a pretty big topic. And we
Hmm.
do see a lot of companies talking about wanting to implement a data mesh. I
Yeah.
think medallion architecture to me is just like you've got stages similar to like a star schema. You've got stages in between getting it to the actual dimensional model where you can publish it. Like it's not that crazy to like a medallion architecture really isn't that innovative. I think it's just a simple way to describe we're going to take raw data, get it to the point that it's consumable, and have some different partitions sequentially along the
Right.
process. Data mesh is it's a really great concept. I think a lot of like C-suite executives, CIOs, CDOs, they really want to democratize the implementation across the enterprise, and they seem to be using that term more frequently than anything else that I'm
Oh,
seeing right
interesting.
now. I don't know what you're seeing, if you've heard any other different approaches, and it really, I mean, there hasn't really been anything else that I've seen people latch onto, but I'd be curious
Yeah,
for
I
you.
mean, one big table by default has sort of been, I think, at least for the
Yeah.
sort of the newer crop of data practitioners, that's been one of the models, I guess, so to speak. So there's a couple classes really. I guess one big table, then there's just a bunch of tables,
Yeah.
and then there's something I quipped about on Ben Rogerton's show, which I called query-driven modeling, which could manifest itself either on schema on read or simply just random SQL scripts that you have floating around in your junk pile of a GitHub repo, and that's those. But the former two, just a bunch of tables, and the query-driven modeling, is more representative of kind of ad hoc data modeling, which is, I think, to be fair, very common actually.
It is super common. I think that's why data modeling is becoming a lot more desirable, is because people feel the pain points of certain things like a one big table or whatever
a billion tables.
A billion tables without any structure.
1 billion tables. One big,
one big table.
1 bajillion tables. I think I called it WTF as well, like wide, tall, and full, as a way of describing one big table. But this is sort of the default, and I think part of this goes back to this notion that joins are bad, so let's avoid them. But I think this comes at a cost, really. I mean, I'm not the approach I'm taking with my book is I don't really care what you do. I'm just telling you different techniques, and you can choose what you want to do. You should be aware of the risks, but your fate is in your hands, as they say. And so, one big table is certainly convenient, but I think it also puts the onus on the person modeling that table to really understand what it is, and also the potential for duplication and all these other things in your data sets, I'm sure you see. And it's everything has trade-offs, but it goes back to this notion again that joins are bad. And because big tech companies have databases where they don't do joins, obviously with our small medium-sized company, we obviously have the same problems, or we're at such a scale where we don't need to, we can't do joins. I'm joking. Most companies aren't. Most companies would be just fine using a star schema or data vault or both for their analytics, and that's just kind of the reality of it. So, but it is interesting, and what I think is also interesting are the geographic and cultural patterns that I see with modeling and architecture as well. Like Europe is a different beast than the United States, 100%. And even different pockets of Europe are different, right? So you go to certain areas where data vault's really, really hot, like Finland, Denmark.
Germany used to be super big. Yeah, Denmark, the Nordic.
Bavaria, it's still big in Bavaria.
Yes, they're still very big there.
Yeah. But then you come to the States, and I think it's starting to get some more traction here. But so it's interesting. Then just different types of companies have different ways of doing stuff. So I don't know what blogs everybody reads these days, where they get their sort of their knowledge pockets, but it is fascinating to watch.
It is. It's interesting how like each subculture has different trends with data. And I've always found that something that's fascinating based on different geographies, like certain things take off where you've got a more technical audience in certain countries compared to others. You've got sometimes more academic approaches you see in Europe, whereas you've got maybe more pragmatic approaches in other areas, depending on the region. And so I actually was going to ask you about this. Given you've been globetrotting, you've been experiencing tons of different data cultures, if you will. One thing that you've talked a lot about is the importance of communities and like non-vendor focused communities, just like general data communities. We saw this with things like Ethan Aaron's meetups, I think
happy
you posted
hours.
Happy hours. Like what do you envision? Because you're very active within the community to create a successful and useful community when it comes to data in general.
I mean, it's interesting because I'm going through this right now with this Discord community. I just started in the last month and a half ish or something like that. So it's called Practical Data. It's on Discord, but it's been an interesting exercise. So I had a Substack community where people would chat. I didn't think that Substack's chat was that great for community stuff. I mean, people were chiming in on stuff, and I think it was good at controlling sort of the conversation, at least like metering it, because it's not a true chat. But to back up, I also started 2 communities on Substack, right? So the one's for my own Substack, the other's for Practical Data Modeling, which is the book I have coming out. So that's and so because I figured let's try something different. Let's actually build a community around the idea
Yeah.
of a book, and then and so these communities overlap. But at some point I was like, well, why don't we try Discord and maybe just get people into a place where they can just chat. And so that's been fascinating, um, because you have people from all over the world talking about topics like data architecture, data modeling, but then they wanted to talk about politics. And I'm like, fine, we'll do a politics channel, right? I'm
Okay.
like, you're all adults, so
Wow.
let's. I mean,
Yeah.
kind of a potentially bold move, but then I have like a channel about just post all the unhinged stuff in there, and then you realize like every channel ends up just be having entropy down to unhinged at some point. They just in different
Yeah.
ways. But then people like sports, and so I started the new sports forum in this Discord, and that's really popular. So there's one on parenting and celebrating career accomplishments. What I realized is communities, we can talk about the stuff we want to talk about with our profession,
Yeah.
but communities, I think, you'll see this in in-person communities as well, like meetups. People just want to catch up on, just life
Yeah.
in general. And this is also an important
Definitely.
part of the communities, which I realize you can't ignore this. And so I've really leaned into providing, I think, a space for people just to talk about whatever they want, really. In
Yeah.
politics, I just had the rule, like, just be respectful. Like, if you're going to debate, have a respectful debate. And I'm sort of the benevolent dictator of everything. If I see something I don't like, I will tell you, and if not, I will make you leave.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how that is. But it's been awesome. Like, I was a bit concerned
Yeah.
at first how this would go, and now I check in maybe once a day. It looks great, cool. But that, I think, is sort of where communities are going, is this hybrid of people, meeting online and then meeting offline, maybe at things like a
Right.
low-key happy hour or so forth. But like, this is sort of, I think, with respect to the data communities, this is sort of the underlying way everything works. We have a communities on LinkedIn,
Yep.
right? And there's sort of this implicit tribe of data people on LinkedIn. When they talk, then there might be other places they can go off of LinkedIn to talk, like Discord or other communities where they, there's just topics where you don't want to talk about them on LinkedIn for every reason in the world,
Right.
right? The other reason I did Discord, which is this actually counter to my philosophy, I thought that maybe everyone needs to use a real name, but I'm like, well, maybe there are certain things where people shouldn't actually, right? And
Yeah. It's like
maybe
Reddit,
if you, yeah,
anonymous, a little bit more
yeah,
anonymized.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I feel as long as the decorum is there and you're not going completely, in full offense mode,
Yeah.
let's try that out, right? But the whole thing is experimenting with communities right now, I think, is more important than ever, and something that's really given me pause. Part of the reason I started a publishing company, for my book and for other people, was because I feel like people are going to want more and more human connections, more genuine types of
Definitely.
communities, especially in the face of AI everywhere.
Yeah.
Increasingly, even on LinkedIn, there's so much AI generated content. I think people are
Damn.
gravitating towards something else. Yeah, it's ridiculous right
It's
now.
crazy. It's
Yeah,
crazy.
it's only
Yeah.
going to get worse. So,
It
but let's find
will.
ways to give people what they want, which is
I
connecting.
love the Discord concept. I feel like there was a point in time where Twitter was super active for data. And then after Elon Musk acquired it, a ton of people dispersed and tried to go in different directions, but none of them really caught on yet.
Oh,
Like Reddit
oh,
serves its purpose, but something in real time, similar to like I think you were heavily involved in like the locally optimistic Slack channel, if I
I
remember
was there for a
correctly.
bit. Yeah, I was there for
Yeah.
a bit.
But that's like, it seems like there's some good momentum to go through a Discord experiment, and it sounds like it's working. So I'm gonna need
It's
to
working. Yeah, join it. Like
be part of
we
that.
do lunch and learns and stuff. You can hop on and do that. But it's like, but I think it's a fun way of just, I think, just cultivating a community where people can just have real conversations. I think that there's other communities like some of you described where it's good, but it's you know maybe it's not something that everyone wants, right? And
Yeah,
so, if you like that, if you like, there's plenty of communities online. You can join a bunch.
for
This just happens
sure.
to be one that there's a bunch of people on and they like it. But but this stems back from host meetups. I've been hosting meetups for a long, long
Yeah.
time. Geez, since 2010, I think 2009 or 2010 was my first one. But co-founded the early Salt Lake City Python group, and that took
Nice.
off. And then in 2017, co-founded the Utah Data Engineering Meetup, which is still going to this day, and that's going really
That's great.
strong. So it's cool to see. But what I realized with the communities and in-person stuff was it's people just wanted a place where they could connect with professionals. In fact, I always thought it would be an interesting meetup, and Ethan Aaron sort of did this, which
Yeah.
was the low-key happy hour. Because I was like, well, why do we have the presentation? Like, it's a presentation at a meetup actually serve anything, or is this a formality?
Right.
And because kind of think of it as a meetup sandwich, as I called it in one of my articles. But it was like you have the networking here, then you have the presentation, and then you have
Hmm.
the networking. But people really just want to do the networking part, so why not just do that? And then
For sure.
Ethan Aaron did that with the low-key happy hour, and it's been successful.
It's been
Um,
super successful. One of our employees out in Raleigh had the Raleigh low key data happy
oh
hour.
yeah,
They would get like 100 people to show up. Like it was pretty well attended, and I think it's just very, it's refreshing to have an event that doesn't have any vendor pitch or
yeah,
presentation or expectation on what you are going there for. Like you just going there to hang out, and then naturally really genuine conversations come out of that. And I think every low key data happy hour, if you were to look at the data over time, picked up in attendance. Like none of them dropped. They were all like
dang.
became their own organic growing events, whether it was in New York, whether it was in Raleigh, whether it was wherever else, which is really cool to see. Like you said, I think people crave that right now. They're looking for less, maybe less formal ways to
Yeah.
interact
Well, especially
with.
after COVID, I think that was the case. I
Totally.
mean, because COVID, I remember my meetup, it went from being, in person and I would say popular, but when COVID happened, obviously, we had to move it online, and that gave that meetup a chance to reach a global audience, right? And so we started
Yeah,
having, very, I would say, globally recognized names showing up at the Utah Data Engineering meetup, which in Utah that would never have happened if that was an in-person event. So that was super cool to see
that is
that. But
cool.
that's what actually led me to do the podcast, and then get into podcasting. But now that it's back, kind of hybrid. It is
Yeah,
interesting. Raleigh's got a really strong data community as far as I can tell. Like there's a huge contingent of
it
Raleigh
does.
people on my Discord. I've been meaning to make it out this year for the happy hour at some point, but we'll
I
see. So,
I draw some parallels with Raleigh and like even Utah, to be honest.
mm,
Like I think they're similar hubs of really talented people who are doing cool things. And there's more startups or early stage companies than one would guess in those
yeah,
areas. And people
yeah,
that are just, yeah, they're like passionate about their jobs. They're curious to learn more. They're eager to meet up. And so yeah, I do
that's
see
super
some
cool.
parallels there.
For the audience listening to this too, feel free to chime in with questions. But I would say, like, get involved in your communities. There's a lot of cool stuff
Yeah.
happening right now, and a lot of cool people to meet. But if you're looking for,
Yeah.
to enhance your career prospects and everything, it really starts and ends with your networks. And the best way to do that
Yeah.
is to go meet people. It's strange, turns out.
Yeah. Yeah. Like actually get out there.
Yeah.
Speaking of communities and thought leaders, I'm sure you've met Sonny Rivera. He left a question on LinkedIn right now, and
Oh,
I'm
nice.
gonna I'm gonna defer this question to you, Joe. But the question is, what do you think about the concept of data readiness over data quality or data models, especially with regards to AI in data?
I don't know what data readiness means. How would you interpret that?
Okay, so if I were to interpret data readiness, I would think that the expectation would be that the data has been prepared properly with documentation, lineage, and quality assumptions in it that make it ready for consumption. But
Okay.
that might not be what other people think, right? Like people might just say the data is ready for consumption, but who knows how the hell it got there, or who knows what
Okay.
it. Are you looking it up right now? You chat
Yeah,
GPTing
I
it?
mean, yeah, I am. Well, I'm just Googling it first.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I mean, there's some vendors. I mean, it's not a term I use that often. It's been around for a bit, but the state of an organization's data that ensures it's accurate, complete, accessible, and of high quality, enabling informed decision making and supporting data-driven initiatives.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess if there's a rubric for being data ready, that would be cool. But implicit in all this is sort of what we just talked about, which is
For sure.
quality and models and
Modeling
stuff. I think it's
quality.
baked in,
Yeah.
right? So, I mean, but it might take it a step further. So, yeah, like I said, I'm not sure why I don't use the term data readiness, but here we are.
I think the BI vendors use it a bunch. Like, is data readiness there or not? Because that's what they care about if they're gonna build a dashboard. But like
That would make
I've heard
sense.
it in those capacities.
That would make sense.
But
Focuses on,
yeah,
Sony says focus on use cases, data versus quality or models. I suppose that I mean, it's interesting because I don't know why this would be a controversial topic. Because the antithesis of this would be I am data unready, or I'm not ready with my data yet. And then the consequence of that would be, well, I couldn't make any vendor happy. Actually, I could because then they're going to tell me all kinds of stuff like, well, we'll make you data ready.
to get the data
And
ready.
so, yes, and this could be the natural consequence of it. But yeah, I think that's. I guess I never put a term to it, but I suppose that it's one of those things that's always been with you. I guess that's how I would evaluate. When I was doing more consulting, I guess that's how I would probably evaluate companies. Is what would quote data readiness be? I guess we just never thought of it in that nomenclature. Right. So maybe I just live a sheltered life or something. I don't know.
I don't know about that. I would be curious though. So we always do a data trends prediction each year. You've probably been on at least one or two of them, but I would love to know what you think are some of the most overhyped trends right now in data. We've talked about different data modeling things. We've talked about different subcultures and regions you've been to. Like what is some trend in data that you feel like is BS? Or just overhyped. Maybe it's not BS, but it's just too many people are talking about it's not as relevant as it should be.
Yeah, I'm always trying to be kind to things, and I don't ever discount things. I just because it's simply a matter of understanding where in the time frame is this happening. Yeah. Are we in the timeline where this actually? I guess some tech nerds call it the Overton window. Are we in the Overton window where this would make sense? This particular trend, or are we not? Or are we trying to force this, right? And so, and it should come as no surprise. I think both the most overhyped and underhyped is anything to do with AI. I think that there's that's the softball answer, but I think it's true. There's a lot of hype because a lot of companies, especially big ones, have every incentive to want to hype it. It helps sell compute. It helps sell a lot of things. And but at the end of the day, I've been in this space a long time and been doing ML for a long time. And I think that it's, how much machine learning do you see in the world right now? I mean, there's a lot. I mean, if you look at your phone and your computers, it's everywhere. It powers a lot of stuff, but you don't, it just sort of does its thing. And if you use your camera, any camera that we're using to record this right now has a ton of computer vision and other things baked in that are just phenomenally great. But we don't marvel at it. You're not talking about your AI camera, like, oh, look at that. I mean, it's just like, it's a camera. Cool, it's commodity, right? And so, so I think that's where it's going to get to. Once I think AI becomes successful is when we stop talking about it.
Yeah, that's fair. Like once it's just, it is what it is. People are. Yeah,
don't think about another secular trend that happened, a long time ago was electricity, right? And so that was one of these things where it's almost like AI, where now electricity is everywhere in the world for the most part.
Yeah, you don't even think about it.
No,
it's just
but
something.
If you lived by candlelight back in the day, you would think hard about it and be like, "That's pretty cool." Sure. Right, but now you have stuff that'll heat up that mug that you're using right now. I have the same mug; it's a nice mug.
That's right.
Thanks for the swag. Of course. But we don't. It's something we just take for granted now. And in fact, we're with the AI boom, we're trying to figure out where we can get more electricity to power more and more data centers and stuff. So that's kind of where we are. So I think it's just, what I find is interesting about this, and what gives me a reason to say this is, you're starting to see statistics come out where, or at least the numbers are coming out from a lot of the big tech companies that are pushing AI, and they're not seeing the sales.
Yeah.
Right. Because what's happening is,
I think Snowflake shared that in their earnings report. They said that the revenue is not, it's not, there hasn't yet been a considerable amount of revenue growth specifically for AI. They're growing great, right?
They're growing great.
They're crushing it, but it's not from all the AI stuff that they've been pushing yet.
For sure. And the thing is, it's the same with every tech vendor out there. Like big companies are trying to
Yeah.
sell agents, and it's like, cool.
Yeah.
They seem really expensive right now, and I'm not sure where I'm going to put these in our company. And but the thing is, because and I wrote about this when the whole ChatGPT thing first started. I was like, just watch what's going to happen. Everybody's going to try and integrate this into their
Hmm.
products, which means at the end of the day, this is an undifferentiated feature. It's no different than if
Right.
pie charts were suddenly invented for BI
Yep.
tools, and it's like, crap, we got to have pie charts now. Okay, we'll put that in. And now, vendors like, well, check out our new pie chart functionality. Like, this is cool. This is going to change everything about how you run your business. Well, when everybody has it, it's not that interesting, right? But that's where we are. There's not
Yeah.
an app that you use that doesn't have some sort of AI feature in it right now. And
Right.
when everything has AI, it's like it's just undifferentiated. So that's where I see, um, but I've been an AI nerd probably arguably since as a kid. If I look at my bookshelf, I mean, there's all
For
kinds of
sure.
stuff where I was reading, and it was like, it's not like I don't understand the power of this. I just think that like when a lot of cycles, we just tend to overcorrect on expectations, and then reality
Yeah.
comes to where it is, and you get the real value out of it. So I think that's obviously the most overhyped one, but that's the easy one. I would say that what do you think is like a challenging one though, an unintuitive one where you think uh, in terms of trends either we're sleeping on it or it's overhyped?
I'm actually conflicted about AI in general because sometimes I'm like, this is going to take over the world. And then other times I'm super underwhelmed, just depending on the use case. Now, I'm I'm really confident it'll get there. Like there are certain scenarios where it does blow me away, but there are other ones where I'm not. And I am very curious to see how that evolves over time and in what time frame. So
Mm.
I don't know if you've had similar experiences. Like, is there anything that's really blown you away recently when it comes to AI related things that you've
I
seen?
think just the like the computer use type stuff I think is really awesome, and I'm curious to see where that goes. I think it's still
Yeah.
super early days for this technology, but I think where I'm most curious is what is what do workflows look like that we can't even envision right now because we're people and we're
Right.
trying to, I think, superimpose the way we work
Yeah.
onto workflows that might perform a lot better. If it's if we can
Structured
figure out what the
differently.
yeah, and I think that's the big question I've been thinking about is like, what does like a true AI native workflow look like where the AI is actually maybe coming up with a workflow and doing it on its own? You're right. So you can call it
Yeah.
agents, you call it whatever you want, but I think that's the stuff I think a lot about because we're going to live in this world where it's sort of the duality of humans and machines, but I think truly this becomes the duality when machines are just operating in a way where humans just don't
Yeah. There's
understand
no
what it
human in the
does.
loop. Yeah.
It just does its thing. I mean, computers sort of behave this way anyway right now, but then what does it mean to have things acting autonomously as agents and agents in the true sense too of like how it was defined, maybe in Peter Norvig and Stuart Russell's AI book, which was
Mhm.
something that perceives something in its environment and then takes action on it, right? But in an
Right.
autonomous way. Like that's, I
Right.
think, how I would look at it, this sort of thing. But it's a fascinating world we're getting into. I always think about what the impact is on, the field and the careers of people, and I'm sure everyone
Yeah.
does at this point. It's one of the most existential things. Um, so
Have you
long
seen
term,
that?
it's
Have
interesting.
you
What's that?
seen have you seen companies, people get impacted by it? Like talking to different businesses or seen it in a way that's uh, either positive or negative for organizations or just people in general?
I mean, I think it positively impacts people who know what they're doing. Say, like engineers who are writing code. It's or putting together
Yeah.
systems. It's been awesome, right? But you got to
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
like what
Using
the
like
filter for.
cursor, something like
Yeah,
that.
it's been great.
Yeah.
I don't know anyone who's saying, "Well, I might ignore this and go back to the old ways of doing stuff."
Yeah.
There are a few, of course, but I think it's those are either they're like the 10x engineer who really is better than AI, and I know a few of
For
them. They're
sure.
actually they're
I know
actually
a few
that
of them
good,
too. Yeah,
right? Yeah.
they'll be resistant to it. They'll be a little bit reluctant to embrace it because they are so smart. But
Yeah.
I would think eventually they'll embrace it just because it's going to become so embedded in everything that we do.
For sure. I mean, I was, doing something this weekend writing code. I was using Copilot. I guess I'm kind of a boomer
Yeah.
when it comes to that, because Copilot's pretty old. But I found myself, I had to do pretty much 90% of the rewrite. I kept prompting it over and over, and I was like, this looks progressively worse. Like, why are you doing this?
Yeah.
And so I was
Yeah.
like, screw it, I'll just go back. But I mean, but that also, I think, indicated that I knew what I was doing, and not just taking the code at face value, right? But I think increasingly that's going to be one of the skill sets that, hopefully we're, I think we're kind of at a juncture right now where you can either go into one direction where you're learning the craft of coding and
Yeah.
learning at a site,
Vibe coding.
working aside
You a big
AI.
vibe coder?
Vibe coding.
Yeah.
Well, vibe coding would be the other direction where you just sort of like,
Yeah.
just accept the LLM, you just kind of go with it, like it's vibes. I shudder to think. I mean, I was writing about. I actually gave a talk about this at Winter Data Conference, where it was right as the term vibe coding had come out, so it wasn't in my lexicon, but I referred to it as the Great Pacific Garbage Patch of AI and code slop. And what I think will happen is you're going to have so much.
Of this.
Yeah, there's a few write-ups on it. It's one of the talks where I just went up and there was a talk I was going to give, and then I was like, I don't want to give that talk, so I just like ditched the slides and everything and just kind of improvised. But it ended up being a fun rant. But the whole notion is, we have this ability right now to create really awesome software products, like, in record time. But it's like, the consequence of not knowing what you're doing, you're going to like pump out just endless amounts of crappy code and crappy systems and crappy architecture. And then the whole thing is disposable, right? So this comes back to the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, which is like, that's a reflection of our disposable consumerist culture, where we just throw endless amounts of garbage into the ocean. And I think this is sort of the future we're looking at if it's unattended, with data and everything else that we work hard to, as an industry, to take care of. So data readiness, I would say, is an interesting concept in light of this. You have this Dunning-Kruger effect of thinking you're ready, but what I also foresee happening is if this goes unattended, so all these companies are talking about how they're going to be laying off engineers soon. I'm like, go for it. Let go of them all and just have AI write all the code, and then rehire them in a couple of years, come and fix all the mess that was created. It's
seems like a horrible approach. I mean, you're seeing that happen in a lot of different companies. I think the engineers would be the last ones you would feel would get impacted by AI, right? Like, you're seeing different support AI use cases where people are like less focused on, phone centers, for example, and like different workflows based on certain questions, which the jury's still out. I think we've both been on calls where you're trying to get a human on the line and it just pisses you off that it takes so long.
Oh my God.
So I don't know how that's gonna come to fruition. Yeah.
Or even worse, you're on the website because you can't call anybody at the company, and then you're like, on the talking to a chat bot.
Yep.
And it's like, we can't help you.
Yeah, it's we'll
send you to another chat bot.
Like, what the So
I had that the other day. Yeah, it's I don't know. It's anyway, it's interesting. so I started rereading Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance last night. It was like, it's written in 1974, and I just wanted to go back to a time. But it talks about the role of technology and how people were frustrated with technology back then. But I was like, I want to go back to a simpler time and just understand what people were thinking back then. So anyway, what were you saying?
I mean, there's been so much innovation. I was talking to somebody when I was walking this weekend around, like, just in the past, my lifetime, going through the digital era, mobile era, AI, internet, like all those things have happened throughout the past 20 years, basically. And this is a really big platform shift. Like, it's happening. So I'm curious, because we've got a few minutes left.
Yeah.
We talked a lot about data modeling, book coming out. I guess when you think about data trends, since you don't want to talk about any overhyped trends, what do you think, like, what data trends do you think companies and teams should care about right now?
It's interesting. I was talking a few months ago with Bill Inman about this.
Nice.
And he was, he's been a really good friend and mentor, but we're discussing basically the camps of like the technologists and the fundamentalists. And the fundamentalists are those who believe in, learning the practices first, learning a craft, and then applying
Yep.
technology to it. The other opposite, the other end is like
Right.
technologists just, it's all about technology. It's great. Maybe don't care about the fundamentals and so forth. I kind of sit somewhere in between, I guess. Like I do like to nerd out on tech, but I think fundamentals are important. And so
Yeah.
what's interesting on this is that you learn to see sort of the pendulum and the arc in which our industry swings.
Constantly. Constantly.
Yeah, and the COVID era was definitely, I would say, the technologist, time. That was just, that's where it was, right? But I
Yeah.
think just given everything that's been happening, you're seeing a swing back to the fundamentals, and so that's interesting. For a lot of reasons, really, AI has presented an opportunity for companies to, hopefully finally get their data house in order, and
Yeah.
that's discussions I see around the world.
Yeah.
Part of this is driven by the sense that, and the recognition that, data-centric AI is a real thing. Like your models are only as good as your data. But
For
it's
sure.
also driven in part, especially in Europe, by regulatory concerns, right? So the AI Act means that
Yeah.
data governance, and management, which was traditionally one of these like extremely unsexy topics. Like,
Totally.
you could drive like a wood paneled station wagon and probably have more sex appeal than than data governance. With like your toupee and stuff on. But
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
this is changing, and
It is. It's
yeah,
becoming way more popular. I mean, I was at
it
the
is.
Gartner conference last week, or was it 2 weeks ago? Can't remember exactly. I mean, they always talked about governance. Like Gartner's always been like big on that, but it's kind of broken that ceiling, I would say, and it's now becoming
Mhm.
a much more common topic across just general people and data practitioners versus it being like strictly this enterprise centric, like almost pie in the sky effort and initiative that was disjointed from the data team. Like
Right.
now it's like actually something that executives care about, data teams care about, and data governance and data stewards care
Absolutely.
about as well.
Yeah.
Instead of it feeling like it was a bottleneck or something that people were resistant towards.
Yeah, and part of it is just how it's framed, right? I think
Mm-hmm.
governance is typically like, well, cool, let's hire the cops to tell
Yeah,
us,
exactly.
give us a bunch of
Yeah, it's
rules.
like, oh,
It's
you want
like,
us to create laws? Like, I don't want to slow down. We're already behind schedule. Like, I don't want to
yeah.
deal with more rules that I have to
Hmm.
abide to.
But
So
it's changing though. So it's
the stakes are way higher. Now the stakes are
the
just way
stakes are
higher.
higher. Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's I was when I was flying over to Europe, I watched there's a documentary on yacht rock. Um,
Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen that one. So
I haven't seen the documentary, but I know there's like Spotify playlists and stuff.
oh, it's
Yeah.
hilarious. Yeah, yacht rock is
Yeah.
a term actually invented in what 2005 by some people who made a YouTube video of all these 1970s smooth rock artists
Yeah.
like Doobie Brothers and Steely Dan and stuff. But it reminds me of that where like these people back in the 70s, these great artists made some music, and then it sort of just like went away, and it
Yeah.
was only rediscovered as a satire.
Our
Um,
VP of engineering listens to it all the time. He's like, that's his favorite Spotify playlist.
oh my God, that's vibe coding for sure.
That's a vibe coder right there.
But it reminds me of the trends that you see where something is just like it's because I remember growing up on these songs. I mean, I'm old. I mean, I remember when like
Yeah.
these were new albums actually. Um, like
Yeah.
record, I
It's made a
still have some
comeback.
probably over there actually. But it was like these were like new albums, and now they were uncool for decades, and they resurrected.
Yeah.
But this is like what you see with trends. Data governance is pretty much like yacht rock in a lot of ways,
Yeah.
where it just was hits that your dad listened to, when he's probably, having a doobie or something, and now it's
Yeah.
cool. Now your kids listen to it. Your VP of engineering listens to it. This is how it is. So,
I know you're probably familiar with Rick Roll.
oh yeah,
That was like now that's become a hit. Like I was at not the grocery store, but like at some restaurant or like a coffee shop, and that song's playing. Like it's
playing Risk Astley at the coffee shop.
yeah.
That's nuts.
We're over on
No
time.
worries. That's
I just
fine.
want to say happy St. Patrick's Day to everybody. Thank you,
Yes,
Joe,
wear
for
your
hopping
green.
on.
You'll be
I'm looking forward to seeing you. So maybe Data Council or Snowflake Summit, definitely one of those two.
for sure.
And I'm really excited to see the book get published, hopefully by this
Thank you.
summer.
I
And
am
I'll
too.
definitely be purchasing a copy. Maybe we'll do another session here to talk about it,
Love to.
like we did last time.
Love to.
Awesome.
All right.
Thanks, man.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks,
Good seeing
Rama.
you again.
Take it easy, man. Later.
All right.